All right. Well, here we are with another edition of the Cyber Mettle Podcast. I think that officially means it's an official thing now. If you do it twice, hopefully we can
It
keep
counts.
carrying it forward. It's just not the experiment, right? So I wanted to, before we jumped into the conversation today, give a little background. Notice that we kind of went in live and went in, pretty cold or hot, depending on your perspective, the last episode. So, Alyson, if you would give the folks a little background.
Sure. So, welcome back. We're here at episode 2. We're very excited. I'm Alyson Laderman. I am a 20 plus, we'll say at least a couple decades worth of litigation and business attorney. I'm currently the CEO of Accolade. We're a cybersecurity and AI security certification company where we bridge the gap between learning and doing. And though I am a practicing attorney, for the purposes of today's conversation, I am not your attorney. So we're not going to be giving legal advice. You should consult your own attorney, but we are going to give you information that will help you make decisions and to ask the right questions so that you know you're going down the right pathway as we get into today's topic.
Awesome. Omar Sangurima. I've been in cybersecurity for, this is wild to say, I feel like I just started, going on 12 years. I've been working strictly in the healthcare space for 6 to 7, been a GRC person for about 8. And prior to that, more on the pen testy side, vuln management, a little bit more technical on that side of the house, and accidentally got into GRC and loved it so much I stuck around. So there, yeah, I think it's just wild how the time goes by, right? With
Well, and how
people and
things shift, right?
yeah.
As you go through your profession and you try different things. I know when we first met, you were doing the GRC certifications and you're like, well, I know the things I don't enjoy,
Yes, yeah,
but the
exactly.
things I need to know, right? And how to
Sure.
build my team and to strengthen that resilience. And that's actually how you and I got together, right? We're having
Mhm,
those conversations about that journey and that experience for you,
mhm,
kind of how we came to come up with like the cyber metal, right? And so the
mhm.
metal part of it really is, I mean, we like to think we're rock and roll, right?
Who doesn't, right? Who
Oh, all the
doesn't?
bad dad jokes. Sorry.
Sure,
Not really.
yeah.
But it's really about the resilience, right? And so part of today's conversation is going to really hinge on that resilience. And a lot of what we're going to talk about is
Mhm,
resilience in some form or fashion. So, with that being said, today, funny enough, I know we're new, but we're going to start something new. One of the things Omar and I have been talking about are tough conversations, right?
mhm,
There's typically a series of conversations, and we touched upon this a little bit last time we chatted. There's always those conversations that you don't really want to have, or you feel
mhm,
like you shouldn't have, or you're uncomfortable having. And you know what? You just got to have them. It doesn't mean that you are weak or vulnerable. By talking through the tough issues and having the tough conversations, you are going to be coming from a position of strength and you're going to be able to strengthen your organization. So we wanted to start off our tough conversations today with a little bit of in spirit of Halloween and Dia de los Muertos coming up and All Saints and everything else, the very exciting topic of death. Um, so we want to talk about death today and business succession planning in particular,
mhm,
and also incapacitation, right? All the things none of us really want to talk about. And I can say, even from my personal experience dealing with it within my own household and with family members from a very young age, which I'll share, but also with friends that I have literally had to help navigate over the last couple of years in
mhm.
scenarios where the conversations weren't had and how that unfolded for them as people and as business owners, right? And as employees of businesses. And so that's kind of where we wanted to go with that today. How does that sound, Omar?
Well, I think it's on the nose for the time period when we're throwing this down, we're recording. But I also think that it's one of those things that you don't necessarily want to break into, but it's one of those areas where you definitely regret not having set forth at the very least, general thoughts or intentions. Of course, you definitely want to hammer them in and get them a little more honed and have standard operating procedures, or this is exactly what we want to do. But more and more, I think you can't distinguish digital identity or your businesses or your personal digital footprint from who you are or who that business is. So in terms of, if you're going to have a resiliency plan as a backup generator for your house, or if you're going to have backups of information for your business, why not also? I think you need to. You'd be doing a disservice to your loved ones and your coworkers and your colleagues by not having this type of conversation that we're going to get into now.
Agreed. Agreed. I have seen it play out for those that are still here, where their loved ones didn't have the conversation because they thought they were protecting their loved ones by not having the conversation. And the way that it unfolds for those that remain, to put it mildly, it really messes up their lives, right? They can't even move on from grieving because they're dealing with so much uncertainty. They're dealing with legal issues now because things weren't accounted for. The sheer breadth of what it is that when you leave behind, when you are no longer here, I don't think people appreciate because we don't, right? We're told, oh, we shouldn't talk about death. We shouldn't talk about politics. We shouldn't talk about sex. We shouldn't talk about finances. Well, okay, what are we going to talk about? And the thing is, the more we don't talk about it, right? It doesn't make it go away. It just leaves your loved ones and your business hurting, quite literally, whether it's financially hurting, emotionally hurting. Like I said at the beginning, I try to figure out which story to pick from, right? I have way too many. I shouldn't have that many stories to be able to go, which one goes first, right? So we'll start with one of my friends had been married 40 plus years and the husband was very sick and had gone through multiple surgeries at this point for organ replacement. So this would not be a surprise situation, right? That there could be a very real possibility that the organ is not going to take the second time because it didn't take the first time. And we should have that conversation. They did not have the conversation. He refused. And when he eventually passed, we literally it is now almost 3 years later, and we are still finding things that she's having to deal with. And this is with a lawyer friend, right? Who literally went in. We had to figure out how to break into the email addresses, couldn't figure out. They came and repoed the car because it was in his name and not her name. And they wouldn't take a payment from her because it was in his name and the bank was in his name kind of situation. It was that bad. We had to go and call and be like, no, we will pay it off. Like it was a whole fight to get that car brought back. It should never have been repo, but they're like, oh, he's gone. Car comes with us. That's the contract, right? Things you don't think about. Trying to figure out, mortgage payments, where's the life insurance, all of those types of things. And again, even the digital assets that you alluded to, we had to go in and hope that there were some passwords that were still saved in a browser somewhere or on a spreadsheet, because we're talking someone of an older generation who didn't do a password protector and trying to hack the spreadsheet and find the piece and the whatever. And it was literally, it's been 3 years. And I think we finally got the last of it, right? For that one. The other scenario I'm thinking about is another friend who last year, her mother, who was in her 80s, who was very, very healthy. So this is going to be the opposite end of the spectrum. Okay. Completely healthy, had bumped her head and had a little bit of a headache. It was like, this isn't feeling great. Was literally at Disney World, came home, week later, bumped her head again. And that set off a blood clot and ended up in a coma. And I got the call of, I think my mom is going to die. I need you. And we went down and my friend, who's, we'll say mid-40s, and she does not like to have the conversation about death. Her dad passed away about 15 years ago. When her dad passed, she never dealt with it. Mom handled everything. So she never looked at the document. It was like, nope, we're not going to talk about it. I'm not going to deal with it. I cannot handle this. So she never had the conversations with her mom. So I come down and while mom is she's in a coma, potential for more surgery. We're not sure if she's coming out, what's going on. We're searching for powers of attorney. We're searching for how we find. It took 3 days of literally escape room style scavenger hunting of a house and digging and piecing it together to where my poor friend who's like trying to deal with the trauma of being an only child. Mom is now comatose, who was her best friend. And she's like, I don't know, as you said before, right? Wouldn't know what I would do without a homie for like a lawyer homie best friend, right?
Exactly.
I don't know what I do. I'm like, I've got you. Like, let's sit down and let's figure this out. And I was able to piece things and find things that were in foreclosures and in bankruptcies and find the right lawyer. I mean, it took a solid week of me taking off of work to help her piece this all together. And mom is out of the coma many months later, but still can't take care of herself. And the documents weren't done quite right. So there's other issues now. Power of attorney may not be valid, the trust, right? Those types of things. And so because they didn't have the conversations, things weren't addressed when dad died. It's now change it to deal with now it's just a mom and a kid. So the documents weren't there. And it's just nightmare after nightmare after nightmare. And part of that involved a business. So mom had her own business. And part of it was trying to figure out the law. It was an online type of store situation and trying to
Mhm.
figure out, oh my gosh, what's with the business? Who do I log in? How do I get to the customers? How do I
Yeah,
shut this down? We don't have other people to run this business, this
sure.
organization. We don't have access. We don't have authority
Mhm.
because there was no business succession planning for this particular business. And as you can imagine, and it's still a nightmare, right? That started almost a year ago,
Mhm.
and she's still dealing with all of that type of
Mhm.
situation. And so, you know, I've got plenty of stories, but like, let's just kind of pause and talk about what happens at a business where if someone doesn't show up because they're gone,
Mhm.
what happens next for that business? What are the things that we need to put in place so that the business can have a succession plan in place?
I think it's drawing corollaries. I mean, with like personal right stories that I have in terms of relatives that in my situation, sometimes the relatives go, "There's not enough there. Who cares? Don't worry about it." But what now I can see, having survived and being on this side of the veil, so to speak, and seeing what
Yeah,
happens is even if that's the case, let's just game that out. Fine, not a lot there, but the the extra burden that you're putting on your loved ones if they're able to manage that burden while also grieving you and have it not affect either side, the grief or the logistics, awesome. I think we just found the next F1 race car driver, nerves of steel. Usually
it's
human
true.
beings are going to be obviously affected by it, and they're going to do both poorly. They're not going to be able to grieve the way
That's
they
right.
need to for the loved one. The logistics are not going to get handled as they should, even if they're like low key, not a lot of assets, no business, right? Like, unwind kind of what, even then, it's still, you're leaving that on the people that you love, that love you,
That's
and
right.
it becomes an absolute mess.
Well, probate. Did you have to deal with probate? Because even at a
Probate
low
and
value, it is the
yeah,
worst. You don't want to
right?
deal with probate, right?
No.
So if you die without a will, it's called
Okay.
intestate, right? And if you die intestate, then has to go through probate and the court has to deal with it. Doesn't matter if you've got 50 cents, right?
Hmm.
It's going to go through the system to make sure, oh, is there debt? Is it right? They deal with, oh, where does it
Hmm.
need to go? And
Sure.
what people don't realize is every state does it differently.
Yeah.
And so, for example, it's literally, so unfortunately I had someone, I'm trying to, keep people's privacy intact, right?
Sure. Of course.
So someone who is related to someone very close to me
Hmm.
recently passed away and knew that was on the horizon. And again, it was a 50-plus year marriage,
Hmm.
right? And this was somebody who definitely should have known better and had several degrees, high level, and several letters after their name.
Hmm.
And to this day, they cannot find the will because he was very, I got it. I'm the protector. This is my role as the man. I'm going to
Hmm.
take care of it. He
Hmm.
took care of it so well. His wife, his remaining wife,
Hmm.
cannot find it. And in
Hmm.
Georgia, not to give away the state,
Hmm.
but in that particular state, the way that it's split is a third, like half to the way they split it is like the family, the wife and the kids. And
Okay.
there's two kids and the wife. And so instead of her just getting the house and the assets, everything's a third, because it's got to go through probate because they can't find the will. And that
Right.
was never the intention, obviously. But now they're having to, in the middle of grieving of someone they were all very close to,
Hmm.
trying to figure out how do we get the stuff to mom? How do we get this to the person who really needs this to continue her life as dad would have wanted
Hmm.
without the documentation? And you still have to go through the court, right? And it doesn't matter how much the asset is. If it's there, if there's anything, you got to probate it if there's no document.
You have to chop it. And it mirrors the same sorts of situations that you see even in enterprise,
Oh,
where
yeah.
it could be, as you say, succession planning straight away. The head of the organization dies, passes, or disappears, right? Just something happens, not there anymore. The proverbial
Yeah,
get hit by the bus sort of scenario.
that's right.
That's one thing. But even honestly, sometimes in larger organizations, look what's going through the news right now with all the layoffs and all the churn in the economy. I'm positive that there's more than one or at least one situation where they're going, wait a second, so and so left. We don't have the keys for this piece of the infrastructure. How the heck are we going to get this thing to work? Or how are we going to patch it? How are we going to update it? How are we going to even access it? Like, how did this thing work? we didn't have the right documentation. We didn't have a good handoff. We didn't handle it well. Maybe we pissed off the person. We're like, oh, a whole set of permutations where at the end of the day, it's still, there's no clear way to hand that over in any sense of the word. At that point, then you're sinking, as you say, right, on the personal side, but on the enterprise side as well, you're sinking tons of time and effort into sometimes relearning SOP, standard operating procedures or infrastructure, trying to figure out how the heck does this thing work? How do we protect it? How do we, how do we keep it up and running so that it still generates revenue, right? So there's no hit to the business, even in less acrimonious situations where it's not a layoff, as you said, when there's just succession. How do we keep this afloat, right? We want to keep the legacy going. But if it's such a, you think, as you said, you think you're doing folks a service by not talking about a taboo issue. But at the end of the day, you're really cutting them off at the knees at that situation. It's tough. It's hard to handle.
And if you're thinking, as you point out, right, it doesn't matter if it's a large business or a small mom and pop business or anything in between. Like I have started and have been an owner of a couple of businesses in my lifetime. And I can tell you when I owned my law firm and it was with an outside partner, so not a family member, right?
Yeah.
And we were bringing in a team of 6 staff members and everything else. We were very intentional about when we set up the business to put business succession in part of our planning. And so part of that business succession, it's funny, there's many layers to it, right? The first layer was, look, if I die, my spouse, who is not a lawyer, would not be able to own the company. And so there was a buyout provision so that he would have to be bought out because he can't own something that he is not licensed to do. Same thing for my partner, right? If he were to die, I'd have to buy out his spouse, right? Buy out his shares so that I could keep the company at that point because she would not legally be allowed to own the company. And I've done that in other companies, even though there's not that legal issue, right? For lawyers, one thing, but in say Accolade, right? We have where each of the spouses are waiving any entitlement to the company.
Gotcha.
That if one passes, if I pass or if my partner passes, then the other can buy the other out, right? Buy the estate out, that kind of thing. And so you're planning ahead, but that's just one piece of it. But that's one piece everybody forgets, right? Everybody thinks, oh, we're all going to get along. There's not going to be a split. Nobody's going to die and nobody's going to be incapacitated. It's all going to be sunshine and rainbows and we're going to make it through. And as we know in real life, that's probably the least likely scenario of any business.
It's such a small percentage, right? You're betting the house on something that truly almost never happens. When it does, it's a rarity, right? Where it goes. What I wanted to ask you was in the first kind of setup where you said, you know what, we got to set up proper succession planning. Like what drove you? Was it like personal examples that you had seen and you wanted to avoid? But like, what was the tipping point to go, listen, even starting this business, we're going to decide how we would want it to end or how we want it to continue? Like what drove you to that?
Yeah. So what drove me to it, honestly, a couple things. One, I had a really good lawyer I was working with and we knew I've been in enough law firms to go, okay, we need to address this issue is, what's going to happen next, right? We have a team. It wasn't just a solo practitioner situation. And even if it was, I'd have to find a way to transition, right? As a member of the bar, you always have to designate a succession attorney. So if I do get hit by a bus, you as my client don't get hosed. I'm sorry, not the word I was going to use. You as my client don't get hosed and set out to try. I'm trying to be PG here in this Halloween episode.
Sure, of course.
No, but truly, like if I'm not here, your case goes on. And so if I've got 200 clients relying on me and I disappear, what happens? And so the bar does require you designate an attorney, a designation attorney in Florida in particular, so that if you pass or you're incapacitated, right? I'm in the hospital, I can't talk, but you've got court tomorrow. Well, then Sally Sue, right? She could take my cases for me because she's who I designated for recovery to pick those up. So that's always kind of on my mind. But personally, where it came from, when I was 10, my father suffered a massive cerebral hemorrhage. And he had a blood clot at 35 that literally took out half his brain. It was the size of a lemon. Excuse me. It left him in a coma for 10, 11 months in a persistent vegetative state. And my dad happened to be a lawyer. He was in criminal law at the time and a really, really good lawyer. And suffice it to say, he never practiced again. Right. And so they had to pick up the pieces and figure that out. But on the personal side, here we were and disability insurance in place and no planning in place. And where
Mhm.
do you go from there? And so sadly, due to life experience, I think it's mostly been ingrained in me of, okay, let's have the tough conversation because good stuff and bad stuff's going to happen. And you make it
True.
through the bad stuff by weathering the storm now. You don't have to worry about everything, but you should consider it and at least it's kind of like GRC planning, right? It's
Yeah.
all right. Different scenarios are going to come up. Nobody had on their bingo card, lemon-sized tumor blowing up in brain, and long story short, my dad is still my kid to this day. So I am my caregiver for my dad. He just had his
Sure.
birthday this week. He's 73 years old and, he's alive, but he can't take
Yeah.
care of himself. Right.
Sure.
So, I now have to have planning in place for me and my
Mm.
family. And
Mhm.
what happens to me, what happens to my dad?
Mhm.
Who's going to take care of him when I go? Because you
Mm.
never know if I get hit by a bus and he's still healthy, right? He's healthy and
Yep.
he's in a wheelchair and in a nursing home, but he needs somebody to pay his bills and get him certain supplies and take care of things. And we are extremely engaged with him. We talk to him every day. We're there on the
Mhm.
weekends. And so his scenario makes me acutely aware. But as I'm getting older and I'm going through this with friend after friend
Mhm.
after friend after
Mhm.
colleague, after colleague, after business, it becomes where, okay, I need to think about this at the start of when I'm starting something. So I don't leave my team that I care about and my family that I care about having to guess woulda, coulda, shoulda, and figuring it out. I want them to be able to do what they need to do. And whether it's grieve and or get business up and running and paying
Mhm.
bills at home or paying bills at work or whatever they need to do, I wanted to make sure that we were putting those things in place so I wasn't actively hurting those that I was leaving behind. And so instead of looking at that conversation of, gosh, I have to talk about death, it's more of, let me talk about how I'm going to take care of those that I care about when I can no longer do so.
Mhm.
And if you shift the perspective to, I don't want to talk about death, tooey, 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 poo, 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 it's going to happen, to, look, it's going to happen. Doesn't mean me saying it out loud is going to make it happen. I get that there's superstitions in religion, but the reality is it's going to happen. What are you doing to take care of those you care about? And even if you're like, look, as you pointed out earlier, I got nothing. It's a little business,
Sure.
whatever. It
Mm.
may not be nothing to you, but it might be something to your customers, your clients. Say you have a pet. Maybe you want to make sure, say you're an alone single person
Mhm.
and you've got a pet. Well, who's going to take care of your pet?
Sure.
Right.
No,
I think,
I'm gonna bring
what
up the
was it? Diane Keaton just left money to her dog.
That's
It can
true.
take care of the dog.
I mean, and I hope somebody's taking care of those amazing hats that she used to rock. Like that was one of my favorite. One of my she always had like it reminded me of like the Sunday service church crown or I'm gonna go watch horse racing, but
Oh,
like
yeah.
all throughout the week. R.I.P. To an absolute legend. I'm gonna
Style icon.
honest to goodness, right? Like
Oh, yeah.
I just remember probably one of the caricatures of like strong woman because my dad was a big Godfather fan. And I would always just like, wow, the one entity that could stop this guy in his tracks is this strong lady that's, slugging it out with him to make sure that her family's not sucked into this void of sadness and death. Speaking of family and voids of sadness and death, see if we can
Nice
manage
transition.
manage that transition there. But the the one aspect that I'd be remiss having seen it firsthand, I'll leave it there, where wanted to jump on, you might not think it's something that you're leaving behind, but sometimes folks will come out of the woodwork as well. And
Yeah.
if you don't have a conclusive, relatively ironclad, this is them breaks and this is how this stuff is going to get handled, then you're inviting such acrimony. It's
Oh,
almost like then you set off a grenade in a family post your passing,
yeah.
where you're doing even more of a disservice through ripple effects by not just locking this down, because then folks are fighting over, and honestly, I've seen it. It could be relatively scraps, but then ego and heartache and contentiousness gets involved, and suddenly it's like, I just want to win. It doesn't even matter that
Oh,
these
they're fighting
assets.
over Christmas ornaments and
Yeah.
dishes and just memories. And
Yes.
sometimes because it's emotional, people fight for the sake of fighting. And you're absolutely
Exactly.
right. If you ever want to see people come out of the woodwork and genuinely hurt and hurt others, it
Hmm.
oftentimes happens in estate and
Sure.
probate litigation.
Yep.
People fight over to those of us on the outside seem like, I don't want to say the dumbest of things, but like the most trivial or seem trivial. But to
No,
them,
no,
that
I'll say it,
teapot
right.
was
Like
great
the most trivial
grandma's and,
things that,
you
like,
know,
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
everybody's got a thing that matters to
absolutely.
them.
Right.
But
Or
if you can account for that ahead of time,
the shed.
if you know little Jimmy wants
Yes.
grandpa's baseball, right, that he got at the Mets game that was signed
Yeah.
by whoever, then you make sure you account for that, right? Even if it's the one thing you own, put a will together with an attorney. And the thing is, people are like, oh, I just put it on a napkin. Okay, well, so the non-legal advice here is every state has different guidelines and requirements for your
Yes.
estate
Yep.
planning. It is not the same from
Mhm.
state to state. And so wherever you live, you need to not just get a form online because
Mm-mm.
different states have different requirements on who needs to witness it, right? How many copies, what needs to be original, where it needs to be
Mm.
stored. You know, when here in Seminole County in Florida, when somebody passes, the original has to be filed with the court in 10 days. So hopefully, A, you know where it's hidden so that you can go
Yeah,
get it and go do
for
it.
sure.
And B, that you have one that exists, right? I mean, it's trying to get and C, have the mindset to be able to handle that within that first 10 days, right?
Inside of 10
Especially if it's
days of post
inside of a
somebody
10-day window.
passing that you care about.
That's right.
That's tough.
Yeah.
But
You know, having walked a friend through it after
sure.
digging up, I mean, I can't tell you how many houses I have had to literally escape room destroy to
Mhm.
go through
To
and go,
find.
all right, it's a puzzle, you know, and that's emotionally how I have to separate myself because these are often people I am already close with, even if they're not family members of mine, but these are
Mhm.
friends of mine that are going through
Mhm.
this and you don't want to see your friend or a family member hurting, right?
Mhm.
But you have to be that kind of that wall for them
Mhm.
and be the strength so they can get through it. And so it's not being unsympathetic. I'm very much empathetic and sympathetic with everything that's going on. But it's like, I know if I lose it, that's not going to help them. And so I have to put myself in a mindset of, okay, let's figure out the puzzle.
Mhm.
Let's go do the pieces. Right. And that's how I'm able to get through it just to kind of, and then, you know, I do my crying and everything else, just like everybody
Of
else
course.
does.
I
Right. And we're
mean,
all human and
I
but you
wasn't
got,
saying, you're like this robot lawyer, you just switch, you just switch off the
it's not so
empathy.
easy to switch off, right? But you do have to get into that space of let's have the I mean, I've done some estate planning for people in the past
Mhm.
where it's okay, we have to have the tough conversation. Like, let's sit down. You're not here tomorrow. What do you want to happen? And sometimes it's multiple conversations over time. And here's the other part of it. And this part we all forget about as businesses and as humans. Over time, things change. So I'm going to bring it right back to GRC and we're going
Yeah.
to bring it back to cyber resilience, right? Just like you need to keep that as an ongoing, continuously monitored, iterative process,
Mm.
you need to do the same thing with your business succession planning and your estate planning on your personal side because
Absolutely.
stuff changes. And I'm not saying, oh, Omar pissed me off today. I'm taking you out of my will. I mean, if you want to do that with your life, knock yourself out. But
Listen, I mean,
you know what? Say now you're taking care of a new family member, or
Yeah.
you've gotten divorced, or you've gotten remarried, or you've brought in a stepchild, or you've got an animal, whatever that, or you don't have the same assets you did. So
Mhm.
maybe you sold the teapot. Maybe get rid of the teapot in the will so people aren't
Sure.
looking for a missing teapot and there becomes a fight, right?
And then suddenly
So
thinking somebody stole the teapot.
exactly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you do need to go back every few years or whatever that cadence is for you, life event changing things,
Mhm.
or just, hey, let me go revisit that. I'm going on a trip. If you're going on a trip, take a look at it. Goodness knows things happen on trips, right? Things happen every day on the highway too. But if you know there's a big life event, you've got a surgery, you've got some medical procedure, whatever it is, look at your business documents. Make sure you've got the pieces in place that if you don't come back tomorrow, right? And it's not even just you. Look at your team. Look at those
Mhm.
people who are indispensable and do the cross training as we referenced earlier, right? You want to make
Absolutely.
sure if Omar's gone tomorrow, who can cover for Omar, right? And do the pieces that I couldn't do your job. You
And
wouldn't
it's
want me
not,
touching your stuff and trying to figure it out. I can't pen test, right? I'm
and you
not going to
have
pretend
to,
like I can get in there.
and you got to look at it like the thing. And shout out to my leadership that they sat me down and said, "Listen, Omar, the best thing you can do for your team, right? You don't. I know you want to be a rock star. It's the place you love working. You like to go out and get after it, etc. All that fun stuff. But best thing you do is build systems. Now it's not so much about what you're doing, and I'll say it right off the top, hard transition to make mentally, but
Yeah.
even in succession planning, you want to build some sort of system, whether it's going to carry your final directives, it's going to carry, hey, this is the intention that this is what I wanted to have happen after, or at the very least, you wanted to protect what you've created such that it can keep going once you pass. You can have that legacy. So either which way you are thinking you want it, that note that you want to hit at the end of your song, it still goes back to you have to have that conversation and you have to plan it. right? But failure to plan is planning to fail.
Yeah.
It's never so much, I think, in front of your face as it can be when these sorts of situations happen. Your stories are bringing up, I think, seeing my dad with get really, really sick, find out he needed a kidney, seeing him go down. And even when he came back, we weren't sure how is he going to come back,
Right.
right? He was in a coma for a while. What's going to happen? I think that for me, that I was 10, my sister as an MD, I think in a good way, she's a bit more direct and engaging with these types of hard conversations, at least on the personal succession side. Like, hey, listen, right? This is what anytime mom has a procedure, okay, I've updated, the medical proxy. Here's the power of attorney. Here's everything that's going to go on. And some would say maybe a little too, like, you seem kind of gung ho about talking about hard stuff. But she, as an ER doctor, that's
Yeah.
just right. She switches in, dials in as you do as a professional, helps navigate and get it done. But even, my in-laws, before they went on a trip, they took a big trip for retirement, made sure we made sure to tell them we were pregnant before they, just in case, God forbid something were to occur. But I also heard, I heard it through the grapevine kind of when they got back, they sorted out everything just in case. You never know what's going to happen on a plane or
Oh yeah.
traveling. You don't want to get sick. So it's not, and they did it again. And when I asked them, hey, that's, and they're relatively young. So I said, what? Well, we don't want to put that on y'all. That's really, what they hit me with. And that was a watershed moment in terms of like, it's a final sign of love. It's a final sign of care, sorting it, or at least setting some intentionality. Cause even that can help. It's not definitely as
Right.
ironclad as you're saying, and you definitely want to go down your route. I'm a fan. You want it all written down because, as you said, probate's nuts. But at the very
Oh, it's
least,
expensive.
like,
I've seen
yeah,
people probate. Oh my gosh, over a house that was less than $100,000, and it cost this person something like $30,000 in attorney's fees for a house that
absolutely,
they definitely didn't want.
yeah,
That was just going to go to the person anyway, but there was no will.
yeah,
And it was a fight to go through probate to give the house, like this third party had to spend close to $30,000 to probate a house that was just going to go to the human living in the house, who was the wife of the person who, I mean, it was insane
absolutely.
and not helpful. And a
Mm-mm.
year and a half, close to 2 years of dealing with it because the court system was slow and it was during COVID. Because that's the other thing, is you don't know what's going on in the world, right?
Absolutely.
Other things are happening. And so, none of this is going to say, oh, you're going to have a definitive, this is how it's going to go. But just like cyber resilience, you're going to have a plan that at least gives you some ways to address these different contingencies of things that may happen, whether it's completely gone, incapacitated, kind of, sort of here, can make some of their own decisions, but maybe physically limited, right? Type of
Mm-hmm.
thing.
Mm-hmm.
And everything in between. And so you do the best you can, but like if you ignore it completely, you're not doing anything.
Sure.
You are going to set yourself up for the worst possible scenario at that. Trying to come up from behind in that area, especially if it's at work and you're going, wait a minute, we just got a new boss because the owners didn't think this through. And
Sure.
now this person doesn't know anything about our field. They don't have any experience in this area. And now they're going to be running this company.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, by the way, paychecks are due. And how do you get that person up to speed if they don't have any idea and nobody knows where the passwords are and you don't have the standard operating procedures in place and all of those other things? So, it's taking the time to put the things in place, but I want to take a step back.
Mm-hmm.
So as you mentioned with like your in-laws, how do you have, what's a great way to start that difficult conversation with somebody who, like my friend, clearly doesn't want to have it, who now living through it regrets it? How do you get somebody to want to have this? Nobody wants to have the chat, but how do you get them to the
Mm-hmm.
table to have the chat, whether they want to or not, and be receptive to the conversation?
I think the ways I've seen it happen, because it's funny. Obviously, didn't get to have it with my father. He
Right.
got sick, came back, and then after that, he was the one that was like, well, there's not much there. And then, COVID, as you said, COVID snatched him. And that
Yeah.
was he was relatively correct. He had remarried and had a surviving spouse, obviously. And then, myself and my sister weren't going to be like, hey, fighting over anything. So that at least,
Right.
but again, very slim, doesn't happen a lot. Trying to have that conversation with my mother, I think then becomes, what legacy do you want to leave? Like, let's talk about it. So you almost try to frame it in a positive way, right? Like now you have two sets of grandkids. How do you want them to remember you? What do you want to do there? Is there anything in particular that you absolutely, the gifting thing, the teapot thing it touched the chord with me because there's certain things that have that sentimental value. You can't quantify it. It's not even worth fighting
Right.
over quantifying that way, but it's very much worth to the people that you're going to leave
Today.
those things to. So what's the one or two things you absolutely want X to have, Y to have? So if you frame it that way, I think, and same sort of situation, right? Like my boss played that mental judo with me. Create a system, like build up your bench so that you can start delegating, right? Kind of went around that way, but then later on told me, yeah, that's part of succession planning, my friend. Like, what if,
That's right.
you leave? What if I leave? What if, the flood happens or whatnot? So trying to frame it at least as much in a positive way as you can, I think is be an aperture. But like what have you seen and what do you do with folks who also, like you said, would refuse?
Yeah, it's a tough conversation, right? With my friend, she was absolutely not willing to have the conversation until she
Mm,
had to.
mm,
And now that she's had to, she and her husband are doing all the planning they need to for their
sure,
2 kids, right? So
sure.
she's at least going, "Okay, I had to live this." And so sometimes it's, "Look, here's real stories," just like we talked about here
Mm-hmm.
of here, this is legit stuff. I have a friend literally right now whose mom passed away a couple of weeks ago. She worked for her mom
Mm,
and mom owned the company. Daughter worked at the company, a couple other employees type of situation. And mom had verbally said, "I'm going to do X," but didn't do that in the documents.
mm-hmm.
And now it's, wait a minute, is there even a company who's servicing the clients?
Oh
Because it was a customer service, not a law firm, but like that, right? Type of
sure.
scenario where you're doing a service. It's not a product. So it's not like they could go buy their Tylenol elsewhere. It's they were relying on these people and this team to do this work for
Mm,
them. So it's very much customer facing service type of work. And now they're trying to just figure out, well, she had a spouse, but not really certified in the right field of what
mm-hmm.
they do to do the work. And now how do we deal with that, right? Because it's a stepfather daughter
Sure.
scenario
Yeah.
and it's a mess and trying to figure out how to undo it, right? So I can tell you when it happened to me with my grandfather, so my dad's dad,
Mm-hmm.
he kept trying to have me come to the table and have the conversation. And I was very close to my grandparents pretty much raised me from
Mm-hmm.
15 on.
Sure.
And so when my grandmother passed, I had to go down to where they were and he handled it in a I need to rip the Band-Aid off because I have to take care of your dad and I don't have time for this.
Mm,
And as much as, I mean, they were married 50 plus years. Okay. So it wasn't that they didn't care about her. He very much did. But for
sure.
him, I need to keep functioning because this
Mm-hmm.
human is relying on me, right? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
it's his kid. It's not like
Mm-hmm.
having a kid, but
Mm-hmm.
my dad, even at that age, was like having a little kid, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because he needed help. And so we went down and it was very much, I need you to do this. And in a 2-day period, it was, we're ripping all the Band-Aids off and the clothes are leaving the house and we're going to do this and the cremation and
Wow.
everything down the line. So when it came to, 10 years later, when he was like, "Look, I'm not feeling well. We need to have the conversations." I was a little resistant. And I was like, okay, let's have some of the conversations. And thankfully for him and his ability to think ahead,
Mm-hmm.
not only did he take care of everything, but he literally left me the best present ever, which was a box. And in the box were just like you said, procedures. It
Yeah.
was, call this number, this money goes to this person, that they're on the policy. Basic
Wow.
things you can do. And again, check with your lawyers and, on this type
Sure.
of stuff. But like
Sure.
transfer on death. So if you've got investment accounts or bank
Mm-hmm.
accounts and you don't
Yeah.
want to deal with a will, even if you've got nothing, you should. If you do
Mm-hmm.
a transfer on death,
Mm-hmm.
then it will take it out of that probate process in theory. I don't want to give
Nice.
legal advice, right? I'm trying to
Sure.
be
I
very
mean,
careful, but
yeah.
in our scenario, right, we
Mm,
put in transfer on death. And so the accounts that needed to go to certain people went directly to them. And the phone numbers of, here's where the pension is, here's how to cancel my Social Security, here's where all the bodies are buried,
mm-hmm.
essentially. No
Mm-hmm.
pun intended, right? But it
Sure.
was,
Sure.
here's the things you need to know, here's the account numbers, here's the logins,
Mm,
here's what you need to cancel. And he made that easy enough for me that that's the gift I try to give people when I have the conversation with them
nice.
of, I was able to deal with my best friend and my grandfather, who essentially was my dad, right,
Mm,
who raised me, the last of my parents, as far as I was concerned, passing, and transition into caregiver mindset for my dad full
sure.
time.
Yeah.
And he gave me that gift of just follow these steps. You don't have to think about it.
Mm,
And that's such a blessing. And being able to share that and say, look, you can do that for your family so that they can move on. Like, it makes me teary eyed, right? So
no,
that
for
they
sure.
can grieve and that they can move on and they can continue on right? With one of the friends that is dealing with the mother who is incapacitated, more or less. A part of it is realizing, oh God, I thought she had a life insurance policy for X amount and it's not that. And I
Yep.
thought my mom cared about me, but she didn't put these things in place. And
Mhm.
looking at it on the back end and going,
Mhm.
how do I fix this? And how do I help her? Like at this scenario, look
Mhm.
how much is not done has been a huge wake up call. And whether or not her mom has the mental capacity to actually do those things now, I don't know
Mhm.
that she does or doesn't. Right? I haven't seen her since this all started about a year ago. So it's like you want to do it when you have the brain power and the wherewithal to be able to do it and to make those decisions. As you say, leave that legacy.
Mhm.
Whether it's, it could even be, look, I don't like my family and I want to give all my money. I love the local theater. I'm going to give the money to the local theater. I'm
Absolutely.
going to give it to this nonprofit. I'm going to give it to the puppy shelter. Whatever it is, even if it's 50 cents, I'm going to go feed the food pantry.
Yeah.
Whatever it is that speaks to you, don't do nothing. Do something that is meaning to you because it's a gift to yourself. It is
Mhm.
literally your last thing you're going to say
Yeah.
when you're not able to say it
Mhm.
or do it. So, when you're looking at that business, it's having those procedures in place, right? Setting up those systems, making sure that when you set up the business or when you amend your partnership documents, whether you're in business, those you've got multiple people at play, what happens when those that own the company, does it go to another company? Or there,
Mm.
if it's big enough, it's probably got those things in place. But if you're small to mid-size,
Mm.
you may not have thought about that when you were putting it in place, right? You want to know if that person on the team doesn't show up tomorrow, how are you going to get into their passwords, have the systems in place, just like you talked about. So I am guilty of this.
Mm.
We have a cloud-based system that we use to store our documents.
Sure.
I absolutely abhor having to download and then, and then upload. And so if
Yeah.
I'm working on a very large document, it's
Yeah.
on my computer.
Sure.
But unless you have access to my computer and you go look in the share drive, it's not in the share drive.
Mhm.
And that's the kind of stuff we have to stop.
Yeah.
We need to make sure the pieces need to be there because if I die tomorrow, right? I get spooked on Halloween and that's it. I lay in the little fake graveyard that we had over here for the
Uh,
kids and that's the end of me. What happens to the company, right? Who picks up next and go, wait a minute, what was she working on? Where are those legal documents? What was this negotiation? Where was this
mhm.
contract? Wait, who's got this and that? Always trying to do cleanup is worse than if you
Mhm.
you do it preemptively, right?
Absolutely.
And that is a gift.
And I've seen some of the places where I've seen it dovetail nicely, even in the enterprise space, is have it be an extension of just straight up resiliency discussion. So
That's
if
right.
you're setting up break glass accounts, if you're setting up like what would happen if there was a catastrophic malware attack and or ransomware or what have you, or if there was a natural disaster and your data center was on the fritz, or we don't have to go too far. Yesterday was what, Azure. Last Monday was AWS, where your critical infrastructure was unavailable. You can have resiliency discussions that cover that. And it's then, I think, a bit of a hop, skip, and a jump to then go, okay, cool, let's tack onto that some sort of, the ultimate resiliency, which is
That's
what would
right.
happen then if, because it's very similar, right? You don't want it, all these particular documentation go to the one place and that one point of failure. Maybe think
That's
about
right.
collective email addresses. Maybe think about shared secrets. Maybe think about rotating secrets, so you keep them locked down. You don't mess around with a separation of duties or least privilege, but then in a pinch, you're able to
Right.
break glass and say, I need access to this, prove obviously that it's legitimate, and then carry on from there. From a business stance, I've seen that sort of work, but again, this is why it's a tough conversation, right, Allison?
Right.
Where it's still that hitch of, wait, talking about death. We're talking about something on its surface is unpleasant. But I think, as you pointed out, what's more unpleasant is leaving a mess
That's right.
on
And trying to
top
clean that
of,
up.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think, what, to your point, as you're talking to your teams about it and you do it in terms of resiliency
Mhm.
of the, just, if you don't even want to say death, because people are like, I don't want to say the D
Sure.
word, right? Like people say, oh, I don't want to say cancer, right? Like there's
Yeah.
certain,
Yeah.
I get it. You're giving power to that word by fearing it, but that's a
I'm
whole other
with you on that.
conversation.
Right.
Yeah.
I joke about cancer at this
It's
point.
like
Maybe,
Voldemort.
maybe,
Just say
yeah,
the
right.
Voldemort.
You can't say it. And then suddenly it's just, you're given that. I agree. I completely agree
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
But just say, okay, let's say resilience. We'll just say, Omar, you are terminated tomorrow. You've been
Yeah.
fired.
Sure.
and we walk you out because we think you did something wrong. It's
Sure.
the same end result of that body isn't here and they're not going to cooperate with you and they're not going to tell you, right? If you have to let somebody go because they did something terrible for whatever reason, right? You've got to go from the company and you walk them out and you lock them out. It's the same kind of cleanup. So as a business, if you plan from this body isn't here for whatever reason,
Mm-hmm.
and you couch it in terms of resiliency,
Mm-hmm.
then you don't have to talk about death, but you're talking about death,
Sure,
right?
you're
It's the same
covering
end result. You're
exactly.
covering it.
You're still resilient there, and that's absolutely a great point. With there could be situations where the people are there, but they're unwilling.
That's right.
Could just be
It's essentially you're dead to me, even though they're still alive.
for sure, right? Like how'd that AWS outage go? It's a shame, right, that I'm not there to help out anymore. Whoops. And without, I keep looking up and remembering because you're bringing up, we had a teammate a couple years ago, passed away very young. And one of the things, the way that I think the team got past it, and the way the team got past it was we kept saying, this is what they would have wanted us to keep going and have it all locked down and to continue their great work. You can still mourn and still remember them and be sad for them, but when they were here and they were that teammate and they were getting after it, right? We can't let them, we'd be letting them down by letting it fall or letting it falter or having it give us a hitch in our step there. So it's just, it's a tough conversation. It's bringing up a lot, I think, on both sides here, but it needs to be had.
Well, I'm glad I got to have it with you. And I mean that sincerely. I mean, you and I find a way to just deal with the tough conversations and go, all right, what would you want? Right? Like you've got a wife, you've got a daughter, you've got a sister, right? You may want to leave stuff to your sister. Like, oh yeah, I've got this from our childhood. Like I've got these photos. Maybe you want that kind of scenario.
Sure.
And by taking the steps now, you're leaving them a final present, right? Of whatever it is you want. And it could be, something I can tell you that I actually thought was super beautiful and sad. And like, we literally sat there and bawled. I'm not going to pretend like we didn't cry. Like that was the one time I lost it when we were scavenger hunting through my friend's mom's house, to find the pieces to try to figure out what goes where. And oh my gosh, there's a payment tomorrow, quite literally. And then how do we get into these accounts and let's go steal her laptop and hack? I don't want to say hack, but
no, but basically
we took steps necessary to get into things that we didn't have access to. Right.
Sure.
And do all those things. But we found in the third room, hidden in a folder of an emergency thing, all the pieces were in different rooms. Some was in the closet. I mean, it was a mess. But one of the things we found was a letter from her mom to her. And it was literally how much she loved her and how proud she was of her and all of the things that if you had one more chance to say something to makes me teary.
No, it's
but it was beautiful. Like it gives you that planning, gives you that opportunity to leave them that one last thing of, I didn't leave that unsaid in this lifetime, whatever it needed to be said.
Yeah.
It's, I've seen the opposite where you could see there was a fight that was left unfixed between the people. And I found that letter for that person in their nightstand where it was definitely a unpleasant situation. We'll just leave it at that. It was clearly something that person died with, where that was in their nightstand, looking at it. Like they died with that, like that disagreement and that fight between them and a family member, like in their heart. And I'm like, yeah, I don't want to leave like that. Like things happen, but I'd like to be able to plan ahead and leave a note for my kid, my husband, my dad.
Of course.
Like if you find this,
right? Like
no more bad
classic,
jokes for you.
If you find this, I've passed, but here, and then you can at least leave them with something where it doesn't have to just be the last voicemail you left them, which might have been good, might have been bad, might have been whatever, but it's the only thing that they have. I mean, this is maybe presaging a future conversation, but this is where tech is getting weird and wacky in terms of setting up AI. Like
you could leave an easy video.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, right now you get on a Zoom call and just, hey, Grandpa, I just want you to know, blah, 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 blah. And if you got this, and the weird thing is, not to make this sound weird, but like you can even make it fun. Like if that person obviously is going to miss you and that kind of deal, you can make it in a treasure chest. Like, it doesn't have to be a big box of death, right? You can make it like a Goonies situation.
That's absolutely going to
Like,
happen. I promise you. If I'm going out and I got some years and hopefully, daughters, I'm definitely like, because again, you want to leave them, but that's where we're going with this. You want to leave it as much on your terms and with your
That's right.
intentions and infused with the unique parts of who you are, whether it's in your
That's right.
business and what you created there or in your personal life and the people that you touch there that are going to care. The folks that are going to care, I think, merit you handling this as professionally or as on point as you would something else that just doesn't have the death kind of moniker over it.
That peace of mind, I'm telling you, is the greatest gift I have probably ever received other than the birth of my son, right?
I could see it. I could see it when you were
just,
talking about it and you kept saying it. You kept going, that gift that he left me, that gift of just, and even again, with some time separated there, look at the impact that it's having, right?
Yeah.
The way that was handled and that you could feel that was a loving gesture.
Exactly.
Right.
And that was the spirit it was intended of. I know you now have to make a big shift in your life, that your dad has died, but now you're actually going to take care of your father, right?
Of course.
Your biological dad.
Yep.
And it just made it where I could pick up and go. And I was able to go to the bank, get the death certificates and get lots of copies, right? And bring them to all the places and close out the credit cards. And he had already started to whittle down. Okay, so this is going to be a little bit of a tangent, but it actually is still the same topic. Also credit to my grandfather. Okay. So when my grandparents were alive and they had a house and 50 years of marriage and family and kids and the whole thing, they had a house. And over the years after my grandmother passed, my grandfather, honestly, thank goodness, started to whittle it down and whittle it down and whittle it down. And I was able to get him to sell the house and move up here before he was sick and be close by so I could be with him and be with my dad and have them nearby, still in their own residence doing their thing. But when I had to clean it out, it was a couple of rooms. It wasn't a 2,500 square foot house. It was a 1,000 square foot apartment that was not floor to ceiling tchotchkes and garbage, right? It was, okay, these were the things that he obviously cared about. And these were the things that I need to deal with. And everything else can be donated and moved on. And the things I needed for my dad, I was able to take out. And my grandfather's clothes, you deal with the pieces. And so that was the other part of the gift, was sorting through the garbage ahead of time. I mean, we as humans accumulate, and we do this at work too. We have lots of digital garbage, right? I am guilty of this. I keep every variety, version of every document. It's a lawyer habit. I can't help it.
It's the lawyer in you. It has to be in terms of,
It is. It's like V1.1 2025
dated with who did the
10.29.
comments. I've seen that tagline when I started working with them at my current job of like, oh, Omar, this is how I'm like, that's serious. Okay. And then every version.
I do every version, because you never know, right? You're going to lose something and you got to go back, or you're like, oh, I don't like that wording. And we're going to go back to before you accepted my changes.
Or somebody tries to be slick with, wait a second, that's not what, well, as a matter of fact, this is what we were working from a couple days ago. So your move there, hotshot. Yeah.
Literally have had that where they'll send me a clean document and I have to go back and go, wait a minute, that wasn't in there. They just think,
100%.
oh yeah, I just accepted. No, you didn't. You changed. You did some shady stuff there.
You did some changes that you then accepted to the changes that I put forward, right? Microsoft Word ain't that magical. All right, let's stop it right now. Yeah.
Oh, Microsoft Word is so magical, especially when you're formatting and it takes forever.
Oh, good. Oh, it's like weird dark magic. It's like the old magics that aren't around anymore. I just want to put a table in this darn thing. Why are you getting offended? Everything else is fine. I'm just trying to put 3 rows.
Would you do a table of contents?
And 2 columns. Oh God. I think the table of contents took me longer than half my dissertation, was just update, right click. No, update. No, you're pulling from why are you pulling the second sentence in the section? It's obviously the big one in bold, my friend. Like, no. Right. Yeah.
Because I've been traumatized by Word. There was literally a meme this week about, lawyer drafting is like 10% draft time, 90% formatting in
100%.
Microsoft Word.
That's 100%. I've seen it. I've absolutely seen it. I've walked away.
Nuts.
Yeah.
Well, I actually, when I do Word, anything in it, I show all of it. I show every symbol. I make sure all of it's showing. Yep. There was why are all your paragraphs? I can't stand the dots. I said, look, I can see where the spaces are. I can see where the hidden stuff are, where the anchors are. They're like, I said, how else are you going to delete it? Hitting delete doesn't do it. You've got to put the codes. You've got to show it. show your work, right?
Yeah.
And everything.
You're out here
But it's a
busting
pain.
out Markdown and Word. I like your style.
I
Really,
do.
that's pretty
I
dope.
stress people out with it.
No,
Like, oh God, take it
but it's
off. Hurts
helpful.
my eyes.
Right? Hey, you
It
want
is
to,
helpful.
like, listen, Markdown is, like, as a
Yeah.
ServiceNow friend and aficionado here, like, Markdown has saved our bacon in a ton of instances, because getting a Word document into ServiceNow, if you don't do it in Markdown, you're going to have a bad time.
Oh
Bad
yeah.
time.
Oh yeah. It's extra tips that we weren't planning on today.
A
Death
little
and
tidbits.
Word.
Exactly. Right. And sometimes, and who knows what it's going to be, right? With that new AI help, like Clippy 2.0 nonsense. I haven't played with it yet, and I'm afraid to, because I just started liking Clippy again. Right?
I honestly miss Clippy.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I got the nostalgia
mostly
for
because you
him.
could turn him into different things, like the little dog.
And there's enough like time between, right, where it's like you don't speak ill of the dead, right? Bringing it back to the, okay, cool. Clippy wasn't that bad.
Zombie
Like,
Clippy. Yeah.
oh God. But now it's some amorphous existential dread blob that has AI powering it. I don't know. Shout out to Microsoft. Somebody figured that was going to be as inaccurate as possible, but I don't buy it. We'll see.
I don't mind adapting and learning new things, but I don't need to be an early adopter until some of the stuff is worked out,
Sure.
especially if something like Word is my bread and butter. And if I lose it, like the document I'm working on, I will lose my stuff.
Yeah. Lose my mind. Absolutely.
Nothing worse than losing your Word document or the content in there and the things behind it.
Ooh. Oh no.
When you're drafting and you're especially if you're creative, right? If you're writing a book or you're writing a contract, or forget it. Losing that is a death
And you
knell.
had great ideas, and you were crowdsourcing the ideas, and you got the structure. Everyone's agreeing to this is how it's going to get done. And suddenly it's evaporated. I don't.
Oh, you mean like last week?
Hey, how about that? Where that we had great, awesome ideas. Another tip on resiliency: don't always trust your cloud provider.
Don't always trust cloud. Right.
Yeah.
We learned that the hard way last week. We had a cloud environment we were using, and we had all of our great ideas that we want to talk about in these tough conversations, and magically we were locked out. Thank you, Google.
It's the two of us were both like, I think part of our anger was obviously at the situation, but then both of us shared, we were angry at also, we knew better. Like, this is like, we're in this business. Like, what, the cobbler's kids have no shoes today. We gotta have to fix that. And now
we have resiliency plans in place.
We do. You bet your bottom dollar that I'm pulling that down every so often just to have it. And
that's right.
And having versions. So,
but see, that's how we learn, right? We learn through mistakes, and yet we tell other people the stories of the other mistakes, and you hope they learn so they don't have to go through it. And then, we do it ourselves. So long story short of all of this, right, is have the tough conversations, figure out what it is you want to do with your business, with your personal life, whether you think it's a lot or not a lot. The people that you're leaving behind, or the animals, or the businesses, or even the nonprofits, or your church, whatever, temple, whatever that it is for you, you can put those things in place to make it your last say, right? And you can do it while you still have say and you have the ability. On top of that is planning for those weird situations, kind of like my dad, where you need help in a way you never thought you needed help, and getting the legal documents in place to allow those to make the choices for you and to make those decisions to help you get the medical care, the residence, the wheelchair, or whatever facility pieces that you can't get on your own because you're not able to do it anymore. That's a scenario that none of us want to plan for. Of what if my life just absolutely changes tomorrow and I'm still here, but I can't deal with it? Now, what do I do? And you can make some of those decisions now of, look, if I have to, then like if something happens to me tomorrow, then my husband is going to make certain decisions, right? But if something happens to me and him because I'm too lazy to change my document, well, then my son makes those decisions, right? Like, and so everybody can, and then after that, I think, don't laugh, but my ex-husband is in there somewhere, right?
Listen,
like we have planned for him. He's part of my life.
You have a resiliency and a succession plan in the ultimate sense. You've seen it. I've seen it, where the alternative is grim.
Oh, yeah.
Where suddenly it's like, well, who would have won? Well, I knew Gramps most, or I knew Dad the most, or I knew this, or you know what? Grandma would have won at XYZ. That can cause divisions, which I'm living, that you don't heal back from. There's members of the family.
There's no recovery.
No.
I saw that in my family, with a couple of aunts, we'll just say on the maternal side, and there was a dispute over property. at the death of their mother. And that was back in 1992, 93. And they, to this day, still do not talk about it.
Yeah.
They don't talk to each other. They're like, nope, that, like you said, you do not come back from that most often. That is a wound that doesn't heal, because you never know, unless that person said, this is what my intention is. It's always going to be my position versus your position versus Billy's position versus Susie's position. And
I knew them better.
I've seen that. Huh? Yeah.
I knew them better.
Oh, please.
Wait a
Oh,
second.
or when they start finding documents, right? I've seen that litigation where, no, this was grandma's will. Oh, well, magically this was, well, that handwriting looks awfully different. Well, yeah, but her handwriting was shaky. Well, this was done 30 years before.
Is that a strikeout or an
ugly.
underline? Right? Like the classic Succession episode, right? Is your name crossed out or is it underlined? Well, obviously Dad would have wanted me to have the company. Oh, really? So, and it happens at all levels. It can happen, obviously, when you got Murdoch money, right? If that's what that show was based on, or if you got, Sangurima,
$20 in your bank account,
exactly.
If you're lucky enough to have a house, or, I mean, that's the thing is people go, oh, I have nothing, right? But at the same time, you've got something. You're wearing clothes. You might have a wedding ring or not, right? Or
Absolutely.
a watch or something that is something to someone. No matter what, if you get stuck in probate, you don't want to do that. Even we were watching Muppets Haunted Mansion last night because Halloween season, this is what we do.
Of course.
And even there, Joe from Legal, the little otter. Of course, I like Joe from Legal.
Of course.
Of course we do. Joe from Legal, the little otter in the song with Kermit in the ballroom dancing scene is like coming up talking about, well, you can come be here, but only if your trust and your will are in place. And he literally holds up the two. And I don't remember seeing that. And I laughed way too hard last night. I'm like,
with big
little
documents.
pause, holding up the will and the trust document going, you can join us once you do these. I'm like, even the Muppets get it. So if the Muppets can have the hard conversations with your kids now, you as an adult can have those hard conversations with your partner, with yourself, with your lawyer, right? Get those things done. And it doesn't have to be an expensive endeavor. It really doesn't. You can find the right lawyer to meet your needs, to get your power of attorney. Like one last piece on this, and it kind of takes it off path, but not quite. When your kid turns 18, okay, they are technically an adult. And they go off to college and stuff happens in college, right? And as young adults are changing and whatever, get your power of attorney and your living will and your surrogacy and all of the in place for your kids. Let them make those decisions now. God forbid your kid gets in a car accident. My kid was in an accident this year. Nothing takes your breath away as a parent like the call of, Mom, I've been in a really bad accident, right? I'm like, okay, at least he's talking to me at this point, right? And I had to go to the hospital and the whole 9 yards. He's 18. He can make the choices at that point. But imagine if he ends up in the position where he can't make the choice, but he hasn't designated you the ability to make that choice. And all of a sudden your kid is on, I hate to bring up the scenario, but like, I always think of like Terry Schiavo and like my dad. Now they're on breathing tubes, right? And all of these things. Did your kid want to remain in a comatose state for 10 months? Like ultimately my dad came out of that state because my grandmother fought to pull the breathing tubes off of my dad. He didn't have the documents in place they were like, no, our job as medical is we have to keep him alive, no matter what that version of alive means, right? The Hippocratic Oath, right? We got to keep him alive. And we're like, yeah, but he wouldn't want to live like this. And my grandmother's like, we are taking him off the feeding tubes and the breathing tubes. He still has a trach scar to this day. I mean, he had it for 10, 11 months. And they're like, we're not doing that. She's like, we are, even though there were documents. They're like, well, then you need to do it. And she's like, show me how to do it. And so she started weaning my dad off of the stuff. And once he got off of the breathing tube and started breathing on his own, he came out of the coma. In that scenario. Like, I mean, this is not going to be hey, this happens to everybody, but that's literally what happened in my life. Wow. And my grandparents said, great, give me my kid. I'm taking him home. And that's what they did. And my dad's right side paralyzed, but he can communicate. He can express his needs. He can binge watch to the end of Netflix and all the other streaming providers and everything else. He goes to activities. He sings along. Or he can't do his own bills. He can't dress himself, but he does have a quality of life with help. So as a parent, though, you want to make sure your kids have those things in place when they come of age, because God forbid something happens. You want to be able to make sure you can make the medical decisions for your kids still, right? If that's where they are as young adults, until they're able to shift that to somebody else. So work with a lawyer. There's several that do it at like college prices just for your kids to make sure there's you want to make sure, because when they're adults, it's on them. They don't have to tell you anything.
Yep.
They're their own little human at that point, right?
Yep, yep.
So it's stuff we don't think about, and it's part of that succession planning, but helping start the conversations with them so that they're comfortable having the conversations with their family, right? The only way to break this cycle of we don't talk about it, we don't talk about Bruno, we don't talk about death, right? Is doing it. Is, look, this is uncomfortable, but let's make it not so.
I think that's perfect
You know,
time.
if you're not weird about it, they won't be weird about it.
Yeah. And you set that tone. I think that's the perfect place to leave it. A tough conversation. We came out on the other side and with a little bit of hopefulness, right? Setting up that next generation with the tools they need to have the best shot at getting out there. Way to
Agreed.
go. Awesome. All right.
Well,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank you. Thanks for this has been great. And again, we managed to still find a through line of hope, I think, through the tough conversation, which I think I hope we continue to do with the other tough conversations that we have slated with that doc that we were able to recover. So yeah.
Resiliency plan that we now have
Absolutely.
in place,
Absolutely.
thankfully.
All right.
Well, if there's other topics that you all find that are tough and you want to see if we can try to tackle it or have that conversation with and work through, we're happy to do it. You can put it in the comments below.
Sure.
And any other feedback you have, because we want to make sure that we are mindful of your time and making this a useful exchange for everybody.
Awesome. Thanks, Alyson. As
Yeah.
always.
Thanks, Omar.
Take care.